You're watching Noir Street. I'm your host, Nero Wolfe. Every story hides a secret, and every shadow hides a clue. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. Subscribe, tap the like button, and join us as we drift into mystery. Chapter 1. The door that wouldn't open. I found the body in the morning paper, and the client on our doorstep by noon, both equally dead, set on making my day sour. The body was in a 3-inch item on page 6, tucked between a minor traffic fatality and a society wedding with an impossible number of bridesmaids. It said that Henry Rowe, known to his friends as Hank, had been discovered dead in his own apartment on East 72nd Street, shortly after 1 o'clock that morning. The words apparent homicide were used, which is a newspaper's way of winking without moving its eyelids. It also said the police were withholding details, which is another way of saying they hadn't figured out which details were safe to admit. The client was not withheld at all. She arrived at 11:47 by my watch, while I was in the kitchen supervising Fritz Brenner's insult to my independence. He insists on feeding me when Wolfe is in a mood, as if I will turn fragile and blow away with the parsley. The doorbell rang with the confident insistence of someone who had rehearsed it. Fritz glanced at me in mild inquiry, but I was already moving. When you live with Nero Wolfe, you develop reflexes like a footman and cynicism like a cab driver. I opened the front door and found a woman who looked as if she had pressed herself into readiness, the way other people press clothes, hard, quick, and with heat. She was in her early 30s, wearing a dark coat that had once been expensive and was now simply competent. Her hair was brown and smooth, her face pale without being weak, and her eyes were grey with that rim of red that says a person has not slept and has been punished for trying. "Mr. Goodwin?" she asked. "That's one of my hobbies. Come in." She stepped inside, glanced around as if to be sure the house was real, and then drew a breath. "I'm Lila Rowe. I saw your brother's name in the paper," I said, because it was useful and because I couldn't stop myself. "And I'm sorry." Her mouth twitched. Not a smile. It was more like the attempt at a smile that died of discouragement. "You saw that already." I read fast. "I came because—" she swallowed, and her eyes went past me toward the shadows of the hall, as if expecting somebody to step out of them and declare a joke. "I came because I was told Mr. Wolfe is the only man in New York who can solve a thing without losing his head, and I can't afford—" She stopped herself, then corrected it. "I can't endure a circus." I closed the door and took her coat. "No, circus is here unless the orchids start riding bicycles, Fritz." Fritz appeared like an obedient miracle and carried the coat away. I led her through the front room, past the comfortable chairs and the good rugs that always make clients feel as if their troubles are being taken seriously by the furniture, and into Wolfe's office. He was in his red leather chair behind the desk, the grey bulk of him settled like a monument someone had decided to keep indoors. His eyes lifted to her and then dropped to me. The expression was as welcoming as a bank vault. "Mr. Wolfe," I said, "Miss Lila Rowe." He made a sound that might have been a greeting if you'd been raised by a misanthrope. "Good morning, Miss Rowe." She crossed the room and sat where I indicated, on the yellow chair, keeping her back straight as though posture could defend her. "I came because my brother is dead," she said. She spoke plainly without the tremble of theatrics, which earned her at least one invisible point. "And because I think the police will make a mess of it." Wolfe's eyelids narrowed by a fraction. "Why do you think that?" "Because they always do," she said, and then amended it. "Because they will decide what happened before they understand it. My brother, Hank, wasn't a saint, but he wasn't careless. And last night," her fingers tightened on her bag strap, "last night he was called. At midnight, I was there. That got Wolfe's attention the way a dropped plate gets a cook's." He leaned forward an inch. "You were in his apartment at midnight?" "Yes, I had dinner with him. We talked. I stayed late because I didn't want to go home." She looked briefly down, and when she looked up again, her eyes were steadier. "I'm separated. It's not relevant except that I was there." "In my experience," Wolfe said. "Everything is relevant. Continue." She nodded once. "At 11:50, his phone rang," he answered. He didn't speak much at first, just listened. Then he said, "Say it again." And then, after a pause, he said, "That's nonsense." He was irritated but not surprised. Her lips pressed together. Then he said, "If you want to play games, do it with someone else." He hung up. I asked who it was and he said he didn't know, which was a lie. He said it with that. She made a little gesture with her hand, that casual tone people use when they want you to drop it. Wolfe's fingers came together, the tips touching. "Did you drop it?" "Number?" I asked again. He told me to go home. I said, "And you obeyed?" She looked at me with a quick flash of annoyance. "I'm his sister, not his servant." I stayed until he calmed down. He poured me a drink to keep me from sulking. Then her eyes shifted to Wolfe. He tried to laugh it off. He said the caller was a fool and that the message was a trick. Wolfe's voice was mild. "The message," she inhaled. It sounded like a riddle. The voice, a man's voice, I think, said, "The door that won't open is the one you paid for, and it isn't a metaphor. Midnight is the last time you can be inside without being invited." I felt my brows go up. Wolfe did not react outwardly, but his gaze sharpened. "That is what you heard?" "Yes." Those exact words. I repeated them to myself all night, so I wouldn't forget. "The door that won't open is the one you paid for, and it isn't a metaphor. Midnight is the last time you can be inside without being invited." Wolfe's eyes flicked to me in our language. That flick meant, "Put it in your pocket, we will spend it later," he asked. "Did your brother respond?" "Only what I told you. He said it was nonsense." But when he said that, he looked. Not frightened, angry, as if someone had stepped on his toe on purpose. She paused. "He told me to leave. I did. When I got home, I tried calling him. No answer. I told myself he was asleep or sulking. This morning I read the paper." Wolfe's voice was quiet. "You said you believe the police will mishandle it. You have additional reason." She nodded, and for the first time she hesitated as if she was stepping into cold water. "My brother had enemies." "A man does not need enemies," Wolfe observed, "to be murdered. He only needs one person with a motive, but enemies are often convenient. Name them." "I don't know all of them." She opened her bag and took out a folded sheet of paper. Her fingers were steady, which told me she had decided to be steady and was succeeding by force. "He worked for Pelham and Dore." I knew the name. Pelham and Dore was one of those real estate firms that made money by moving other people's money from one pocket to another and charging rent for the privilege. They did development, leasing, management, and if rumors were true, anything else that could be spelled without invoking the
Nero
law.
Wolfe
"Hank was a
and
leasing
Unbelievable
manager,"
Cause of
she said.
Wristwatch.
"He
A jeweler
handled certain
shows Wolfie a
properties.
watch that only
Last
runs
month he
when he
told me
won't
he'd gotten
listen.
himself into a
Open the
situation.
back, there
He
was a
didn't
sheer
explain,
thin wire,
but he was
like silk.
excited.
The watch is
He
tied
said
to
he
a
had found a
person.
door that
The
wouldn't
angel
open for
told
anyone
Jeff,
else,
let's figure
and that
out
he
the
had the
story.
key.
Hope you
Wolfe's
like
lips
it.
compressed.
Comment
He
next
used the
and wait
word
for
door.
part 2.
Yes, he joked about it. He liked to talk in images. That's why I remembered the caller's words. It sounded like Hank, like someone was mocking him in his own voice. I took the folded paper from her when she offered it and glanced at it. It was a list of names with phone numbers and short notes. Works at Pelham and Dore, tenant, building super, lawyer, friend. And at the bottom, a name underlined twice, Calvin Voss. "Who is Voss?" I asked. Her eyes hardened. "My brother's partner," Wolfe said. "Partner in what?" "Miss Rowe." She hesitated, then chose her words like someone choosing stones to cross a river, in something he wouldn't tell me. But Voss was his closest friend. They went to school together. They drank together. They complained about their jobs together. Lately, Hank was secretive. He met Voss at odd hours. "And this Calvin Voss," Wolfe said, "does he know you came here?" Number I didn't call him. She looked directly at Wolfe. "Because the last time I saw him, he said something that didn't fit. Hank had told me he was going to make a change. He said he might quit Pelham and Dore. He said he was tired of being used." Her chin lifted. When I mentioned that to Voss, Voss laughed, and said Hank would never quit because Hank liked the taste of power too much. Perhaps he knew your brother better than you, Wolfe murmured. Perhaps, she said. Or perhaps he wanted Hank to stay where he could be watched. Wolfe studied her. You have, what, suspicion, fear, that is not enough to justify my involvement. Have you brought money? She flinched, but only slightly. Yes, not a lot. But she reached into her bag again and produced an envelope. I brought what I can pay now, and I can borrow, and I can sell things if I have to. Wolfe did not look at the envelope. I do not accept cases on the basis of desperation. I accept them on the basis of interest, and the police will object to my participation, I said. They object to your participation in breathing, but it hasn't stopped you. Wolfe ignored me, he said to Miss Rowe. What do you want from me? To identify the murderer, to protect you, to salvage your brother's reputation, to discover what door is being discussed? Yes, she said without blinking. Then her voice softened. Mostly, to understand why. Hank wasn't a good man, Mr. Wolfe. He wasn't a bad one either. He was my brother. If he was killed because he was foolish or greedy, I can bear that. If he was killed because someone decided he was in the way, like a chair that doesn't match the room, then I need to know who did it. Wolfe's gaze moved to the envelope at last. He did not reach for it. Miss Rowe, do you know Inspector Kramer? I've heard the name. You will hear it more, Wolfe said. And I will not go to your brother's apartment. That is absurd. She stared. Then how can you? I have an assistant, Wolfe said. Mr. Goodwin is regrettably mobile. I shifted my weight and sighed. It was a reflex, like rubbing a bruise. Wolfe kept my legs in business. Miss Rowe looked at me. You'll go there. Do you have a key to your brother's apartment? Number the police have it. They let me in briefly this morning to identify. Her voice caught, and she took a breath. To identify him. Then they told me to leave. Wolfe said, as they should. However, there are ways of entering an apartment without a key. Mr. Goodwin will attend to that. Miss Rowe blinked. Is that legal? Wolfe's expression was faintly offended. Legality is often a matter of timing and persuasion, Mr. Goodwin, I said. Yes, sir. Wolfe leaned back, his hands returning to his stomach, as if to assure himself it was still present. I will consider the case if, and only if, you supply me with the voices involved. Not alibis, not speculation, voices. I want to know who spoke to your brother, who heard him, who profited from his fear or his anger, and who will lie to preserve himself. Miss Rowe stared at him. How can I supply you with voices? You will cooperate, Wolfe said. You will speak when you are asked. You will permit Mr. Goodwin to speak to those on your list, and you will not, under any circumstances, indulge in heroics. She sat very still. Then she nodded once. I'll do it. Wolfe's eyes slid to me again. The message was clear: go collect, return. I opened a drawer and took out my notebook, because it's a habit, and because Wolfe has never forgiven me for trying to remember things with my brain alone. I asked Miss Rowe, what time did you leave your brother last night? A little after midnight, 12:20 maybe. Did anyone else come or call? Number. He walked me to the door.
Nero
What
Wolfe
door?
and the
Wolfe
umbilical
asked.
cord of his
Suddenly,
watch.
Miss Rowe looked at
Until
him,
shows
puzzled.
Wolfie a watch
His front
that only
door.
runs when
Wolfe's
someone
eyes
touches it.
narrowed.
Open the
Describe it.
back, there
She
was
blinked
a
again,
hair-thin
and for the
wire
first
that
time her
the
composure
watch is
wavered,
tied to a
not
belt,
from grief,
then a
but from the
gilded
surprise of
that
being asked
surely
about something
was
so
stolen.
ordinary.
Hope you
It's
like
a
it.
normal door,
Come over
brown,
next,
2
and I
locks.
will drop
He
part
always
2.
kept the chain on when he answered. Always, Wolfe repeated softly. I scribbled. Wolfe asked, did he mention a door recently, aside from his metaphorical conversation with you? He said something about a basement door, she said slowly. In one of the buildings he managed, one of Pelham and Door's older properties. He said it was the file room service door. Tenants complained it stuck, but he said it wasn't stuck. It was kept that way. He said it was a door that wouldn't open unless you knew how to shove it, and he laughed and said the building had secrets. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Which building? I don't know the address. He wouldn't tell me. She looked down at her hands. He said it was better if I didn't know. That, Wolfe said, is often a sign of stupidity or guilt. Her head snapped up. Which was it? Wolfe regarded her calmly. We will discover that. Mr. Goodwin will begin by discovering whether your brother's front door truly opened. I frowned. What do you mean? Wolfe's eyes were bland. Your chapter title, Archie. I stared at him for a second, and then I remembered the line she'd quoted. The door that won't open is the one you paid for. And it isn't a metaphor. I had been treating it as a riddle. Wolfe was treating it as a fact. Miss Rowe followed my expression and said quickly, His door opened when I left. Did it? Wolfe said. Open easily. She thought. Yes, I didn't notice anything. Wolfe's gaze moved to me. You will notice. He shifted his attention back to her. Miss Rowe, the police will ask you questions. Answer them truthfully. Do not volunteer my name, and do not attempt to contact Calvin Voss. Her lips parted. Why not? Because I told you not to, Wolfe said, as if that were a complete philosophy. She sat back, her hands clenched. All right. Wolfe's eyes moved to the envelope again, and this time he nodded at it with the faintest motion. It was the closest thing he did to accepting money in advance. I reached over and slid it into the desk drawer because I enjoy being useful when I'm being ordered around. Miss Rowe rose. What do I do now? You go home, Wolfe said. You attempt to rest. You await instruction. She looked at me again. And you. Always, I said. It was a lie, but it was a polite one. Fritz appeared at the door like a well-timed curtain. Miss Rowe, he said, and escorted her out with the quiet dignity that Fritz gives everyone, even people who don't deserve it. When she was gone, Wolfe stared at me as if he expected me to have turned into a telegram. Well, I said. Any more instructions? Or do I just run in circles until a clue trips me? Wolfe's eyes were mild, which means he was dangerous. You will go to the Rowe apartment. You will observe. You will listen. You will speak with any police you encounter, and if Inspector Kramer is present, you will be respectful. I snorted. I'm always respectful. It's just that my respect often sounds like sarcasm. Wolfe ignored that. You will find out what Henry Rowe bought. I blinked. Bought. Wolfe's fingers tapped once on the arm of his chair. The caller said, The door that won't open is the one you paid for, and it isn't a metaphor. That implies a purchase. A door may be purchased literally or figuratively. In the world of real estate, doors are often purchased by the square foot. You think it's about a building, I said. I think, Wolfe said, it is about access, about entry, about being inside without being invited. Mr. Rowe was warned that midnight was the last time he could be inside without invitation. Then he was found dead in his own apartment. There is a contradiction, I said, unless the warning was about something else, and he ignored it.
Nero Wolfe and the
Wolfe's
Unbelievable
gaze held
Power of
mine.
Wristwatch. A
Unless.
jeweler shows
I
Fully
sighed
a
again,
watch that only
this time
runs
with
when
more
someone touches
conviction.
it.
All
Open
right,
the bag,
I'll
there
go.
was
But
a
if I'm going to
tiny
break into an
opening by
apartment or
back.
sweet-talk a
The
cop,
watch is tied to a
I need
bracelet,
ammunition.
and a jeweler
Who's the
keeps it
detective on the
that's way
case?
out the story.
Wolfe's lip curled
Like
faintly.
it
That is
coming
what the
next,
voices
and
will
I
tell
will
you.
drop part two.
But you may anticipate that Inspector Kramer will insert himself. That was not anticipation. It was prophecy. Kramer has a nose for Wolfe's cases that makes bloodhounds look lazy. I went upstairs to get my hat and coat. On the second-floor landing I could smell the orchids, Wolfe's pride and joy and personal excuse for staying indoors. The house was quiet, comfortable, and secure, as if crime was something that happened in other addresses. In my room I grabbed my shoulder holster and checked it, because I'm fond of being alive. Then I went back down, picked up the car keys from the bowl on the hall table, and paused long enough to look into Wolfe's office again. He had already dismissed me in his mind. He was sitting back, eyes half closed, as if he had turned inward to consult some private library where the books were all labeled, "People are foolish." Anything else? I asked. He opened one eye. Yes. Bring me voices, Archie, I said. Not alibis, I heard. His eye closed again. Good. So I went out into the February air, which was cold and sharp and full of automobiles with bad intentions, and got into the car. As I started toward East 72nd, the newspaper's little item about Henry Rowe sat in my mind like a pebble in a shoe. The riddle sat there too, heavier. A door that won't open, midnight as a deadline. A man killed in his own apartment. A sister who remembered words because she didn't know what else to hold on to. And if Wolfe was right, and he usually was, even when he was wrong, it wasn't only Henry Rowe's apartment door that mattered. It was the one he'd paid for. Chapter 2. A voice. With two shadows, I went to Hank Rowe's office over a pawn shop, where the air smelled like ink and old arguments. That wasn't poetry. It was chemistry. Pawn shops have a particular odor, metal velvet, that has seen too many hands, and the sour tang of desperation trying to pretend it's temporary. Hank Rowe's place was one flight up from that, as if a man could escape the stench by climbing 12 steps and changing the sign on the door. The sign said Rowe, leasing services in black letters that had once been proud and were now merely stubborn. Under it, in smaller type, was appointments preferred, which means walk, ins resented. I tried the knob. Locked. I knocked, listened to the silence, and knocked again. A voice called, "Just a second," with the weary patience of someone who has spent his life being interrupted by people who want something. The door opened a crack, and a man's face appeared in it. Narrow, pale, with a chin that looked as if it had been sharpened on purpose. He had dark hair combed neatly to the side, and eyes that measured you before they permitted you to exist. Yes, Archie Goodwin. I held up my credentials the way a man holds up a ticket to get into a show he doesn't like. I work for Nero Wolfe. That name still has an effect in Manhattan, like the odor of onions in a respectable restaurant. Some people savor it, some people gag, but nobody fails to notice. His eyelids flickered. Wolfe, that's the one. I'm looking into Henry Rowe's death. If he was genuinely surprised, he hid it well. If he was only pretending not to be surprised, he did that well too. He opened the door wider and stepped aside. Come in. The office was cramped, as if it had been designed by a man who didn't trust open space. 2 desks, 3 chairs, filing cabinets with scars, and one window that looked down on the pawn shop's back entrance where a man was unloading something wrapped in a blanket. The air smelled like ink and old arguments, typewriter ribbon, stale coffee, and paper that had been handled by too many people who insisted they were right. The man closed the door. My name is Louis Bragan, clerk, office manager, he said, and the way he said it suggested he had promoted himself in his own mind for years. I took a chair and opened my notebook. How long did you work for Hank Rowe? Bragan's mouth tightened. 2 years. Long enough to know his habits. Last night he was here, yes. What time did he leave? Bragan answered too fast. 11:40. It was so clean it might have come out of a machine. No hesitation, no searching of memory, no human fuss. The number arrived dressed and pressed like it had been ironed. I nodded as if I believed him the way people nod at a waiter who says the special is wonderful. 11:40, you sure? Positive. Because you looked at a clock. I always look at the clock. That was a good line. It suggested routine, the kind that makes a statement sound safe, but he said it a little too smoothly, and his hands folded on the edge of his desk. Where to still? Most men move when they talk. Still, hands are either very controlled or very frightened. Walk me through it, I said. How did the evening go? Bragan's eyes shifted to the window and back. Mr. Rowe worked late. He often did. He had a meeting earlier. Then he came back here. He was in his office. He gestured to a door at the back. I was at the front desk. At 11:35 he came out, put on his coat, said goodnight. He left at 11:40. You time people for fun. His jaw tightened. I note when the office closes. On a Friday night. It's my responsibility. That word, responsibility, is a favorite hiding place for lies. Men put their lies under it, and then dare you to dig. All right, I said. Who was he meeting earlier? Bragan blinked once. I don't know. You don't know who came in. The building has other tenants. People come and go. Not into this office. The door's locked. He swallowed. It was small, but Wolfe likes facts with fingerprints, so I wrote it down, swallowed on locked door. Was Calvin Voss here? I asked. Bragan's eyes went blank for a fraction of a second, like a lamp flickering. Number. No hesitation at all. He frowned, annoyed. No, he wasn't. Was anyone else here besides you and Hank? He shifted his weight. Number. Lewis, I said pleasantly. You keep answering like you're reading from a card. That's fine if you're selling insurance. I'm just here to listen to your voice. He stiffened. My voice. Sure, Wolfe's collecting them. It's a hobby. That made his mouth twitch. But it wasn't humor. It was nerves. I stood up and wandered toward the back office door. Can I look? Bragan stepped quickly to block me. Too quickly. There's nothing in there that concerns you. Everything concerns me, I said. It's in my job description. He held his ground. Mr. Rowe's papers are private. Private for a dead man is a fine idea, I said. But it usually expires along with the body. His nostrils flared. You can speak to the police.
Nero Wolfe
I
is the
can,
umbilical
I
cord
agreed.
of wristwatch.
But I'm speaking to
A
you
jeweler
because you're
shows
standing
with a
here
watch
and you've got
that
a
only
throat.
runs when
Open
someone
the
touches
door.
it.
For 2 seconds,
Open the bag.
he looked as
There
if he
was a
might refuse.
pale thin wire.
Then something changed.
The watch is
Either he
tied to a
decided he
bison.
couldn't afford
The
to,
jeweler kills
or he
the
decided
jeweler
refusing would
just
look worse. He took a key ring from his pocket and unlocked the
next,
door.
and I will drop part 2.
Hank Rowe's private office was smaller than the front, but it had more personality. A battered leather chair, a desk with a blotter, and a shelf lined with property binders. There was a safe in the corner, short and squat, the kind a man buys when he wants to feel secure without being extravagant. I looked at the desk. One drawer was slightly ajar. You tidy? I asked. Bragan's voice was stiff. I keep things in order. Then why's that drawer open? He glanced and said, Maybe Mr. Rowe left it that way. Maybe. I leaned in and saw a faint scratch on the wood near the lock, as if a key had been jabbed in wrong and forced. Not enough to call a carpenter, but enough to call a mind. I didn't touch anything. I just saw it. Seeing is legal. I moved to the safe. Was this used? Bragan's answer came too quickly again. I don't know the combination. That's plausible, I said. But you know it's there, and you know whether Hank fussed with it. He said, he didn't, last night. Number. I wrote down no blink, then I noticed something else. A thin smear of white on the edge of the safe's dial. Not chalk exactly, more like the residue from a hand that had touched plaster or powdered something. It was faint, but it was there. Any work being done in the building? I asked. Bragan's shoulders lifted a fraction. The pawn shop downstairs is always doing something. Not a real answer, I said. Any plaster dust up here repairs painting? He shook his head. Number, he said it like a man saying no to a drink he wants. I went back to the front office. So Hank left at 11:40. Yeah, and after he left, I locked up and went home. What time? He hesitated. A genuine one this time. Around midnight. That pleased me. A lie has edges. A true memory has fuzz. Where do you live? I asked. Queens. What part? He gave me an address. I wrote it down. I also wrote down the way he licked his lips after he gave it, like a man who had just handed over a piece of himself. Did Hank receive any phone calls here last night? I asked. Number none at all. Bragan's eyes narrowed. The phone barely rang, yet he was murdered after a midnight phone call. Bragan's face tightened. That's what they say. They, I said, meaning the police. He didn't answer. I closed my notebook. All right, Lewis, you've been helpful. His eyes flashed. I have. Sure, I said. You've shown me how a man answers when he wants his words to be believed. He stared, and for the first time I saw a shadow behind the control, fear plain and simple. Mr. Goodwin, he said quietly. Mr. Rowe was complicated. He made deals. He made promises. He stopped. He paid for a door, I said, watching his face. Bragan's eyes flicked, just once, toward the back office. That's enough, he snapped. You're finished. Maybe, I said, and walked out. Downstairs, the pawnshop bell jingled as I passed, and a man behind the counter looked up with the bored eyes of someone who had seen every kind of trouble, except the kind that wears a suit. Outside, the February air slapped me awake. I didn't go straight back to the brownstone. I took 10 minutes to sit in the car and write what Wolfe would want. Not just what Bragan said, but how he said it, when he swallowed, when his eyes moved, and what he tried not to see. Then I went home. Wolfe was in the office, of course, because Wolfe is always in the office unless he is in the dining room or the orchid rooms, which are simply extensions of his empire. He didn't ask if I'd eaten lunch. He didn't ask if I'd been shot. He asked.
Nero Wolfe
Well,
and the umbilical cord
I sat
of
in the
his
chair
watch.
opposite him
A jeweler
and opened
shows
my
Wolfe a
notebook.
watch that
Louis
only
Bragan,
runs when someone
office
touches it.
manager,
Open the
smooth
back,
liar with a
there are
nervous stomach.
hair thin wires.
Wolfe's
Like
eyes narrowed.
the watch is tied to a person.
Give me the
Jeweler
voice.
will
So I
check and
did.
figure it out just
I
for you.
repeated Bragan's words,
Hope you like
including the
it.
two clean
Next, and I
1140,
will drop part
the
2.
instant denials, the stiff indignation, the small, genuine hesitation when he reached something he hadn't rehearsed. I told Wolfe about the scratched drawer, the safe, the faint white smear, and the way Bragan's eyes jumped when I said door. Wolfe listened like a safe with ears. When I finished, he said, "Again." I scowled. "You heard me." "I heard," Wolfe said. I did not yet listen again, so I repeated it. Slower, the same facts, the same rhythm, the same ironed number. When I finished the second time, Wolfe's eyes half closed, and he smiled like he'd heard a wrong note in a hymn. "Archie," he said gently, which is how Wolfe sounds when he is about to be unbearable. "Mr. Bragan is not merely lying, he is reciting." "Reciting what?" I demanded. "A line he has been given," Wolfe said. "And he has been given it by someone who knows that a clean lie is often the ugliest." I stared at him. "So what do you want next?" Wolfe's gaze lifted to the ceiling, toward the orchid rooms above, as if he could consult the plants. "I want," he said, the other shadow behind that voice. "And how do I get it?" Wolfe looked back at me. "You will find Calvin Voss, and you will bring him here." I sighed, because it was either that or throw something. "Sure," I said. "I'll just go out and pick him off a tree." Wolfe's smile vanished. "Do not be flippant, Archie." "Too late," I said. "It's my charm." Wolfe waved a hand as if dismissing both my charm and my existence. Go. Chapter 3. The three who heard the call. I lined up the people who claimed they heard Hank's last call, and I did it the only way you can line up New Yorkers, by making it sound as if refusing will cost them time, money, or dignity. By 2 o'clock, I had them arranged in Wolfe's office, like mismatched chess pieces, Rafe Danner, Toby Graft, and June Heller. Wolfe stayed in his chair with the composure of a man attending a concert he paid for and intends to judge. I stood by the desk with my notebook, ready, and my patience already thinning. Rafe Danner was first to show, because men who deal in opportunities like to be early. They think it makes them look important instead of anxious. He was mid-40s, broad, shouldered with a haircut that suggested he had strong feelings about mirrors. His suit was too good for a man who claimed to be merely a consultant, and his smile was too practiced for a man who claimed he had nothing to hide. Toby Graft came next. He was the building manager from Hank's address on East 72nd. He looked like the kind of man who had been managing buildings since buildings were invented, heavy, gray, perpetually tired, with hands that belonged on a mop handle. He kept his hat in his lap, like a security blanket, and watched Wolfe's office, as if expecting it to try to collect rent. June Heller arrived last, breathless and irritated, as though she had been forced to abandon a schedule she worshipped. She was in her late 20s, slim, with hair pinned up tight and eyes that did not blink often. She dressed like a woman who wanted to be taken seriously, and knew she had to fight for it every hour. Wolfe eyed them without offering any words that could be mistaken for hospitality. He left the speaking to me, which is his idea of efficiency and my idea of a slow death. All right, I said. You're here because Henry Rowe is dead, and because each of you has said you heard a midnight call connected with his death. Mr. Wolfe is interested in what you heard. He is not interested in what you think. Ralph Danner's smile widened by a millimeter. We're all shocked, Archie, Hank was. Save it, I said. We'll get to your grief later. June Heller's lips tightened, but she kept quiet. Toby Graft shifted in his chair as if his spine was trying to relocate. I started with June because
Nero
she had that
Wolfe and
efficient look
umbilical
that
cord
suggests she can tell a
wristwatch.
story
The
without
jeweler
decorating
shows
it.
Wolfie a watch
Miss
that never
Heller,
runs
I
when
said,
someone touches it.
where were you when this
Open the
call
back.
happened?
There was a
Her chin
pure
lifted.
thin wire.
In Hank's office,
The
at
watch is
Pelham and
tied to a
Door.
person.
We were going
She
through lease
refused.
renewals.
Let's figure it out
At
slowly.
midnight.
Hope you like
Yes.
it.
Rafe
And
Danner
next,
gave a
when
soft
I saw
laugh.
part two.
That sounds like Hank. June's eyes flicked to him with something sharp. It sounds like work, I said. Did the phone ring? Yes. Did Hank answer? Yes. Did you hear the caller's voice? A little, she said. Not clearly. But you heard something. She hesitated. I heard a whistle. There it was. 2 short notes like a bird trying to remember a song. She went on quickly, as if she wanted to get to the end and be done. 2 notes. Then the man spoke. Hank went still. He told me to be quiet. Did you hear the words? Only fragments. Something about a door. Hank said it was nonsense and hung up. I nodded and turned to Toby Graft. Mr. Graft, you said you heard the call too. Toby's hands tightened on his hat brim. Yeah, I was there. He cleared his throat. I was in the building. Mr. Rowe asked me to come up. To his apartment. Yes, at midnight. Toby shrugged, uncomfortable. It wasn't exactly midnight. It was around then. Were you in the room when the phone rang? I was in the hall. Mr. Rowe had me look at the lock on the door. That was the first new fact of the day, and it landed with a satisfying thud. What lock? I asked. The front door lock, Toby said. He said it was sticking. Sometimes it wouldn't catch right. He wanted it checked. Wolfe's eyes opened a fraction wider. I filed it away. The door that wouldn't open was starting to grow teeth, I said. So you were in the hall? Yes, I could hear through the door. The phone rang and then I heard a whistle, 2 short notes. Then Mr. Rowe said, say it again. Then he said, that's nonsense. Then he opened the door and told me to leave. Ref Danner snorted softly. Nice hospitality. Toby glared at him. It wasn't my idea. I turned to Rafe. And you, Mr. Danner, you claimed you heard the call. Ruff spread his hands. I was there. Hank asked me to stop by. We had business. Where was there? I asked. At Hank's apartment, he said smoothly. He wanted to talk privately. Toby shifted, startled. I didn't see you. Raff's smile held. You wouldn't. I came in through the service entrance. Toby blinked, offended. That entrance is for deliveries. Raff shrugged. Then deliver me a complaint. June Heller's eyes narrowed. I was with Hank at his office at midnight. Raff's smile didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. Then you weren't with him at his apartment. Apparently not, June said coldly. The room tightened. Wolfe didn't move. He let them bruise each other while he listened. Which is one of his pleasures. I said, one at a time, Mr. Danner. Tell it straight. Rafe nodded, as if indulging a child. Fine, I met Hank at his apartment. He'd told me to come at 11:30. I arrived a little before midnight. We were talking when the phone rang, he answered. Before the voice spoke, the caller whistled 2 short notes. Hank's face changed. He listened, he said. That's nonsense. He hung up. Did he say anything else? I asked. Rafe hesitated. Just a touch, and then shook his head. I wrote down the hesitation. Wolfe likes his facts with fingerprints. Now we had 3 stories, 3 witnesses, and 1 neat agreement. The whistle. It was the kind of agreement that screams rehearsal. People who tell the truth have little inconsistencies. Timing, emphasis, what they noticed. People who rehearse don't dare to vary, because variation is where they get caught. But Wolfe didn't pounce. He never pounces until he has decided exactly where the throat is. He stayed in his chair, looking as if he were considering the fate of a dull universe. Then he spoke. "Not to them, but to me, Mr. Goodwin," he said. "Ask them one question." I felt the shift in the room. Even the air seemed to hush. I knew Wolfe's voice well enough to recognize that he had just found a hinge. "What question?" I asked. Wolfe's eyes remained on the three of them, as if they were specimens on a tray. "Ask, did the whistle come before the greeting or after?" It was such a small thing that it seemed silly. It was also the kind of small thing that makes liars sweat, because liars rehearse the big notes and forget the timing between them. I turned to June Heller first, because she had been the most precise. "Miss Heller, before the caller spoke, did Hank say hello, or did the whistle come before any greeting?" June blinked. "Before," she said. "The whistle came first," Hank answered. "Then the whistle. Then the man spoke." I nodded and turned to Toby Graft. "Mr. Graft." Toby frowned, trying to remember a rehearsal that hadn't included this. Hank answered the phone. I heard him say hello, then the whistle." I turned to Rafe Danner. He was still smiling, but there was a new tension around his eyes. "Mr. Danner, the whistle came after Hank said hello," Rafe said smoothly. June Heller's head snapped toward him. "You said it came before." "I did not," Rafe said, still smooth. "I said the caller whistled before he spoke." "That's not what you—" June stopped herself, jaw tight. Toby looked between them, confused and suddenly worried. 3 people, 1 detail, 3 different orders. I felt it, not in my head, but in the floor, as if the house itself had heard it. One of the floorboards creaked under the weight of it, a soft complaint from old wood that had been forced to hold a new truth. Wolfe's eyes half closed. He looked satisfied in the way a man looks when someone has finally admitted the obvious error in a bad argument. I said carefully, "You realize you can't all be right." Rife's smile finally slipped. "Memory isn't perfect." "No," I agreed. "But rehearsal usually is." June's face flushed with anger. "Are you accusing me of—" "I'm accusing nobody," I said. "Not yet. I'm collecting voices." Wolfe spoke then, to them this time, his tone polite in the way a guillotine is polished. "You have been cooperative," he said. "You may go." Toby blinked. "That's it." "For the moment," Wolfe said. "Mr. Goodwin will contact you if you are needed again." Ruff rose first. Regaining his smile as if it were a weapon, he refused to sit down. "Always a pleasure. Wolfe. Archie." He left with the confidence of a man who believes charm is armor. Toby shuffled out next, looking as if he had just realized he was standing on thin ice and didn't know how long it would hold. June lingered. Her eyes were bright with anger and something like fear. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, "Hank didn't deserve
Nero
this."
Wolfe and the
Wolfe's
Umbilical
gaze
Cord
settled
of
on her.
Wristwatch. A jeweler
"Few
shows
people
Frisbee
deserve
watch
murder,
that
Miss
only
Heller.
runs when someone
That does
touches
not
it.
prevent it."
Open
She
the bag,
swallowed and
they have a
left.
hair
When
thin
the door
wire
closed
like
behind
that.
her,
The watch is
Wolfe
tied to a
turned his eyes to
person.
me.
Then a jeweler killed
"Well,
that
Archie,"
of the
I let out
story.
a breath.
Hope you
Same
like
whistle.
it.
Different
Comment
order.
next, and I will talk
Somebody's
faster.
lying. Wolfe nodded, almost gently. Wolfe ignored that. "You will find the telephone, the instrument, the line, the exchange, the record. If there was a whistle, it was either a human mouth or a device. If it was a device, it has a purpose. And if it has a purpose, it has a maker." I stared. "You want me to chase a whistle?" Wolfe's eyes were calm. "I want you to chase the shadow behind it." I looked at the door they'd gone out. 3 witnesses, 1 dead man, and a call that had sprouted 2 notes like tiny hooks. "All right," I said. "But I'll tell you this. If that whistle turns out to be a canary, I'm quitting." Wolfe's lips tightened. "You will not quit, Archie." "No," I admitted. "But I like to threaten it. It keeps me young." Wolfe dismissed me with a glance, already turning inward again, and the house creaked softly, old wood, old secrets, and a new weight settling in. Chapter 4. Timing is a weapon. I checked the building's lobby log, and it was the kind of document that looks innocent until you notice how much power it gives to whoever holds the pen. The lobby of Hank Rowe's building had been designed to reassure tenants that their money was buying dignity, marble that had been polished into submission, brass that shone like a good alibi, and a doorman chair that looked as if it had been imported from a small monarchy. The doorman himself was new, young enough to still believe people were generally decent, and he watched me with the mild suspicion reserved for anyone who asks questions without carrying parcels. "I'm looking for the log," I told him, his eyebrows lifted. "Police?" "No," I said, worse curious. That made him frown, but the word police lives in every lobby like an unpaid tenant, and he didn't want trouble. After a moment he produced a ledger from under the desk, heavy and official, looking with a ribbon bookmark like it was the Bible. "Who signs this?" I asked. "Toby Graft, building manager. He writes down visitors and service people. It's policy. Policy is what happens when nobody trusts anybody," I said, and opened it. The entries were neat, too neat. Toby's handwriting had the kind of heavy strokes that say he leans on the pen. It was bold, confident, and, on certain lines, oddly generous with ink, as if he had gone over them twice. I found the page for last night. There was an entry at 11:32, Dana, R, Apt 12B. There was an entry at 11:48, maintenance, elevator. And there was an entry at 12:05, row left building. That last one was written darker than the rest. The ink pooled slightly at the end of building, like the pen had hesitated there, and then decided to commit. I looked up. "Toby wrote this?" "Yes," the doorman said. "He came down after midnight. He always writes his own entries." "Of course he does," I murmured. Men who want to control a story prefer to write it themselves. "What about the elevator?" I asked. "It was acting up," the doorman said. "Got stuck between floors. Repair guy came. They put a tag on it." "A tag?" He nodded and pointed toward the elevator. There was a small paper repair notice taped near the call button. It wasn't fancy, just a printed slip with a date and time and the name of the service company. But it had the one thing a liar hates, a stubborn fact. I walked over and read it. "Elevator out of service 12:02, AM 12:17, AM released and reset. 12:17 AM." I stared at it for a full breath, because I wanted to make sure my eyes weren't improvising. They weren't. If the elevator was stuck until 12:17, Hank Rowe could not have left the building at 12:05 unless he had used a stairwell. And if he had used the stairwell, Toby Graft would have been the sort to mention it, because it would make his log look smarter. Timing doesn't bend without breaking. I went back to the desk and ran my finger along Toby's 12:05 entry. Was anyone watching the front door around then? The doorman shook his head. "I went to the restroom, just a minute. Toby was here. Toby was here," I repeated, writing. The doorman shifted, uncomfortable. "Is something wrong?" "Something's always wrong," I said. "It's New York." I closed the ledger and handed it back like I was returning a borrowed sin. Outside, the February air was sharp enough to make a man honest, but it didn't seem to be working on Toby. On the way back to the brownstone, I stopped at a corner diner and drank coffee that tasted like it had been boiled with resentment. I used the time to think about what Wolfe had asked, voices, not alibis, and how timing is one of the best voices there is. People can rehearse words. Clocks don't rehearse. They just keep going. When I got home, Fritz let me in with the calm expression of a man who knows the world is absurd, but prefers not to discuss it. I went straight to Wolfe's office. He was behind the desk as usual, with the air of a man who had not moved since breakfast and saw no reason to start now. I held up my notebook. "I found your clock," I said. Wolfe's eyes opened a fraction. "Proceed." I told him about the lobby log, Toby's bold ink, the two neat entries, the darkened 12:05 line. Then I described the elevator repair tag and read the times aloud. Wolfe did not interrupt. He listened, and when I finished he lowered his gaze to the desk, as if the desk contained the answer and had been hiding it out of spite. He tapped his fingertip on the blotter, 1, 2, 3, slow and deliberate, like he was measuring a heartbeat. Contradictions, he said at last, are clocks that tell the real time. I nodded. So Toby's either lying about when Hank left, or Hank didn't leave the building the way Toby says, or Wolfe said. And his voice became slightly more interested. Henry Rowe did not leave at all. That hit the back of my mind like a thrown coin. I pictured Hank's apartment door, the lock Toby had been asked to inspect, the midnight call with the whistle, and the elevator jammed like a bad excuse. You think the murder didn't happen in the apartment? I asked. Wolfe's eyes lifted. I think you will not leap. You will walk. We have a building manager who records times with enthusiasm, and we have an elevator that refuses to cooperate. There is intent. The question is whose? And what do you want me to do? I asked. Wolfe's finger stopped tapping. You will speak with the elevator repairman. You will discover who called him, and at what time mechanical failures are often arranged, and men who arrange them leave traces. I grimaced, chasing a whistle and now an elevator. Wolfe's expression was mild. You prefer corpses? Not today, I said. But give me time. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Archie, yes, sir. Do not let Mr. Graff know you have noticed his ink. I blinked. Why not? Wolfe's mouth tightened. Because men who lie about clocks do not like being corrected. They prefer to break the clock. I stared at him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Outside, the house settled with its usual quiet creaks, and inside Wolfe's office the air felt heavier. Not with dread, exactly, but with the knowledge that the time on the wall and the time in the case had begun to diverge. Timing is a weapon, and someone was holding it. Chapter 5. The pattern in the speech Wolfe made me bring each suspect's exact phrases, not my summaries. So I did, word for word like a stenographer with bruises. He had me in the office after lunch, when the brownstone is at its most deceptive, quiet, warm, civilized, with Fritz's cooking drifting through the halls as if murder was something that happened in cheaper neighborhoods. Wolfe sat behind the desk with a pencil and a legal pad, looking less like a detective than a judge, preparing to sentence language itself. Begin, he said. You want impressions? I asked. I want words, Wolfe replied. Impressions are for poets and fools. So I gave him words. I opened my notebook and read June Heller first, because she had been crisp, and because Wolfe enjoys crispness the way a cat enjoys a bird. June said, I told him. To be clear, I was in Mr. Rowe's office at Pelham and Door at midnight. To be clear, I didn't leave until he told me. And to be clear, I never went to his apartment after that. Wolfe's pencil moved. He underlined to be clear once, then again. Then a third time his face did not change, but his eyes had that small gleam that means he has found a stitch to pull. Continue. I read him Rafe Danner's voice, smooth, amused, just a shade too relaxed. Rafe said. I recited. As I recall, Hank asked me to come by. As I recall, I arrived before midnight. The phone rang and, as I recall, the whistle came before the man spoke. Wolfe's pencil hovered. He underlined, as I recall, with a slow contempt. Memory with a
Nero
lawyer,
Wolfe
I
and the
said.
umbilical cord
Wolfe
of
didn't
his
look up.
watch. A jeweler
Yes,
shows Wolfe a
continue.
watch that only
I
ran
gave him
when he
Toby
wanted to use
Graft,
it.
and I did it the
Open the
way
back,
Toby said
there
it.
was a hair-thin white
Heavy,
flag.
defensive, eager to
The
be
watch is
believed,
tied to a
Toby said.
person. The
I read,
jeweler killed.
honest.
Let's figure it out just
I was
right.
just doing my job
How you
honest.
like it?
I didn't see
Comment
nobody
next,
else.
and I will drop
And
part.
honest, if Hank left at 12:05, that's what he did. I wrote it down. Wolfe's pencil stabbed honest 3 times, as if he wanted to pin it to the paper like a beetle. I closed the notebook. That's the trio. Wolfe did not speak. He leaned back and studied his legal pad, the way a man studies tracks in snow, except Wolfe's snow was language, and his tracks were the places where people stepped wrong. At last he said, Again. I sighed. You just heard it. I heard, Wolfe said. I require it in my mind as well as my ear again. So I repeated the phrases. June's to be clear, Rafe's as I recall. Toby's honest. The repetition did something interesting. It made each one sound more unnatural, like hearing a song twice and realizing the singer is off. Key. Wolfe set the pencil down and tapped the pad with one thick finger. These are not merely habits. They are defenses. Everybody has defenses, I said. Some use locks. Some use lawyers. Some use ink. Wolfe's eyes flicked at me, and some use unnecessary emphasis. Miss Heller says to be clear because she fears she is not clear. Mr. Danner says, as I recall, because he wishes to leave himself room to retreat. Mr. Graft says, honest because honesty is not his natural posture. I leaned forward. So which one killed Hank? Wolfe's mouth tightened. Do not be childish. I'm not childish, I said. I'm impatient. Wolfe ignored that. A murderer does not always speak like a murderer, but a liar speaks like a liar, and a man arranging time such as Mr. Graft speaks like a man arranging time. He announces honesty as if it were a badge, because he knows it is not. I thought of the lobby log and the elevator tag, 12:05 written in dark ink, and 12:17 taped to brass by a mechanic who didn't care about anyone's story, I said. Toby's our clock breaker. Perhaps, Wolfe murmured. But do not forget that clocks can be broken by other hands. He reached for my notebook. Give me the exact words of Lila Rowe. I blinked. Lila, she's not a suspect. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. In a murder, everyone is a suspect until eliminated. Words. First, sentiment later. I flipped pages and read. He answered. He didn't speak much at first, just listened. Then he said, say it again, and then he said, that's nonsense. And she quoted the caller. The door that won't open is the one you paid for, and it isn't a metaphor. Midnight is the last time you can be inside without being invited. Wolfe's pencil returned, and underlined inside, and invited. Then he underlined paid for and pressed hard enough that I could see the paper buckle. Now, Wolfe said softly, we have the shape. The shape of what? Wolfe looked up, and for a moment his eyes were almost pleasant. An alarming condition. Of a plan, it involves access, it involves timing, and it involves a performance designed to be overheard. A performance, I echoed. You mean the whistle? The whistle, Wolfe agreed. A signature or a signal. I sat back. So, the whistle is a tell. It is a flourish, Wolfe corrected. Some men cannot commit a crime without signing it. It satisfies vanity. It also creates confusion when multiple witnesses remember it. I frowned. But why would they all agree on the whistle if they weren't coached? Wolfe's pencil made a small circle on the paper, around June's to be clear. Because someone wanted them to agree. Uniformity is a counterfeit of truth. It is persuasive to the police and comforting to the guilty. I let out a slow breath, and the different answers about whether it came before or after the greeting is where the counterfeit fails, Wolfe said. Because the counterfeiter did not anticipate my question, I said. You enjoy that. Wolfe's lips twitched. I tolerate it. He pushed the pad toward me. The underlined words looked like footprints leading away from a fresh grave. Now, he said, you will obtain more words. From whom? I asked. From the elevator mechanic, Wolfe said, and from the telephone company, and from Calvin Voss, if you have not yet managed to pluck him from your tree. I grimaced. You never let a metaphor live. Wolfe waved it away. Go. And Archie. Yes. Bring me their phrases exactly. Not your opinions. A man may conceal his acts. He cannot easily conceal his diction. I stood, tucking the notebook into my pocket like a weapon that only Wolfe knew how to fire. All right, I said. I'll go collect more footprints. Wolfe's eyes returned to the underlined words, and his voice was almost gentle. Do so. They are leading us somewhere. And I assure you, Archie, the destination will not be pleasant for someone. I can't write in Rex Stout's exact style, but I can continue with the same classic Wolfe and Archie flavor, witty first, person narration, crisp dialogue, tight logic, and that brownstone gravity. Chapter 6. The office confrontation. Wolfe invited them all to his office. No one leaves the brownstone, but plenty get dragged into its gravity. He did it the way Wolfe does everything, without haste, without apology, and with the serene certainty that people will obey because it is easier than not obeying. I made the calls. I used my most pleasant voice, which is the one I reserve for delivering threats that can't be prosecuted. Rafe Danner arrived first, which fit him. Men like Danner treat punctuality like a silk tie. Another thing to display, he came in with that same polished smile and sat down as if the chair were a negotiation he had already won. Stiff as a ledger, shoulders squared, face arranged. June Heller was next. She wore a simple coat and carried a folder like a shield. She sat with her knees together and her hands folded on top of the folder, neat as a typed apology. If she had nerves, she had them stapled down. Toby Graft came last, and the room noticed. He tried to enter quietly, which is difficult when you bring a smell with you. Wool, sweat, and the sour edge of fear. He sat gingerly, as if chairs could testify. Sweaty as a confession, Wolfe did not rise. He did not offer his hand. He did not offer them anything except his attention, which is expensive and therefore insulting to waste. "You are here," he said, "because your statements contain an agreement that is improbable and a disagreement that is instructive." Rafe's smile showed teeth. "That's charming. You always talk like a book." Wolfe's gaze slid over him. "I always talk like myself, Mr. Goodwin." The matter of the whistle. I stepped forward, because Wolfe likes to keep his hands clean, metaphorically, at least. All three of you reported that the caller whistled 2 short notes. June's chin lifted, because he did. Toby swallowed. "Yeah. 2 notes. Rafe shrugged. "It's an odd detail. That's why it stuck." Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. Odd details do not stick with such uniformity unless they are pressed into place. "Mr. Goodwin, have each of them demonstrate." June blinked. "Demonstrate." "Whistle," I said. 2 short notes, exactly as you heard it." June's face tightened. "This is absurd." Wolfe's voice was mild. "So is murder, Miss Heller. Proceed." June hesitated. Then, perhaps because refusing Wolfe is like refusing gravity, she brought 2 fingers to her mouth and whistled. It was clean and sharp, 2 notes close together, like a quick question asked. Twice. Tweet. Tweet. Not musical, but precise. Wolfe watched without expression. I watched her throat. It moved once after she finished, a small swallow, as if she had just done something she disliked. "Mr. Danner," I said. Rafe's smile returned, and he looked almost amused, as if he were indulging a parlor trick. He whistled without using his fingers. Show-off style 2 notes. Yes, but his were a shade longer, with a lazy slide between them. Tweet, tweet, like a man dragging his feet through a story. June's eyes flicked toward him. Sharp, then away. "Toby," I said. Toby's face went red. "I ain't much of a whistler." "Try," Wolfe said. And there was no softness in it. Toby fumbled, wet his lips, and whistled. 2 notes came out, but the spacing was wrong, not close, not quick. There was a pause between them, a hesitation that made them separate events instead of a pair tweet. Tweet, like a fake signature written slowly by someone afraid of getting the curve wrong. The room went still. June's mouth tightened. Rafe's smile stopped being friendly and started being careful. Wolfe leaned back a fraction, as if settling into comfort. Then he spoke, and his voice was soft, soft as a blade that has already found the skin. "Only one of you," Wolfe said, "is copying a sound you never truly heard." Toby's eyes widened. "What the hell?" Wolfe raised a hand, not to calm but to command. "You will be silent, Mr. Graft, until you are addressed." Toby shut his mouth, but his breathing didn't get the message. Rafe chuckled, brittle. "So now we're convicted by musical talent." Wolfe's gaze did not move. "Number by timing." June blinked. "Timing?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "A whistle is not merely sound. It is pattern. 2 notes can be identical in pitch, and still different in meaning depending on spacing. One of you gave 2 notes as a single unit, an intentional signal. One of you gave 2 notes as an afterthought, an imitation. And one of you, Wolfe's eyes cut toward Rafe for a moment, embellished, as men do, when they believe charm can replace accuracy. Rafe's smile returned by force. Careful, Wolfe. Wolfe ignored him. He looked at June. Miss Heller, you whistled as a person would whistle who heard it clearly. June's face flushed. Thank you. It is not a compliment, Wolfe said. It is an observation. He turned his gaze to Toby. Mr. Graft, you did not hear it. You were told of it. Toby's hands gripped the chair arms. That's a lie. Indeed, Wolfe said. It is. Toby jerked forward. I was in the hall. I heard the phone. I heard him. Wolfe lifted a finger. You heard a telephone conversation through an apartment door while you were in a hallway, and while you were, by your own statement, examining a lock. Yet you recall the whistle with such confidence that you repeat it to the police, and you record a departure time in a lobby log that contradicts a mechanical service tag. Your relationship with time is imaginative.
Nero Wolfe and
Toby's
Archie
face went
call
damp.
a wristwatch.
I wrote what I
A
saw.
jeweler shows
You
first
wrote
a
what you
watch
needed,
that only runs
Wolfe
when someone
corrected.
touches it.
Rafe
Open the
leaned
back,
back,
there was
crossing
a
one
pure
leg,
thin wire,
but his
like
fingers had lost
the
their
watch is
ease.
tied to a person.
This is
That
entertaining,
guilt
but you
that
still don't have a
tells the
murderer.
story.
Wolfe's
Wolfe
eyes
did
returned to him.
comes
Patience,
next,
Mr.
and I
Danner.
will drop by.
Murderers are rarely patient, which is why they are often caught. June's voice cut in, tight. If Toby didn't hear it, then who told him? Wolfe did not answer her. He looked at me instead. Mr. Goodwin. Yes, sir. Ask Mr. Graft, Wolfe said, who instructed him to place that whistle into his account. Toby's head snapped. Nobody instructed. Wolfe's tone did not rise, but it hardened. Mr. Graft, you will either answer, or you will discover how unpleasant Inspector Kramer can be when provided with contradictions and a cooperative witness. That did it. Toby's eyes darted to the door, then back to Wolfe, then to me, as if I might suddenly turn into mercy. I didn't. He swallowed. The girl said it. June stiffened. What girl? Toby's eyes flicked toward June, then away. The assistant, June. She said. The caller whistled. She said it was important. June's face went pale. I never spoke to you outside that hallway. I didn't even... Wolfe's hand lifted again. A small, decisive motion. Enough. This is productive. Ruff's smile was gone now. Wolfe, you're twisting. Wolfe cut him off with something rare. Direct contempt. Mr. Danner, you may be silent as well. Ruff's jaw tightened. Wolfe looked at Toby again. Mr. Graft, you did not hear the whistle. You heard of it. Therefore the whistle is part of a story being distributed. He paused, letting the words settle like dust. Now, Wolfe said. The question is, who needed the story to exist? The old brownstone creaked softly, as if acknowledging it had been asked to hold another weight. And I had the unpleasant feeling that we were no longer collecting clues. We were watching a trap being assembled, carefully, politely, and with Nero Wolfe's hands never leaving his chair. Chapter 7. The missing minute I went back out for the one thing Wolfe can't fetch, the city's stubborn little details. New York has a talent for holding on to the small, ugly facts, like receipts, shoe scuffs, and the smell of onions on a man who swears he hasn't eaten. Wolfe sits in his chair and reasons. I take my legs and go shake the facts loose from the places they hide. The place I shook first was the corner diner 2 blocks from Hank Rowe's building. It wasn't romantic. It was stainless steel, bad lighting, and coffee strong enough to make a priest tell the truth. The kind of diner that stays open late because it knows the world doesn't stop being hungry just because decent people go to bed. I slid onto a stool and gave the counterman my best harmless face. You the manager? I asked. I managed to be here, he said. Good enough.
Wolfe
I'm looking
and
into a
Archie
death,
call
Henry
a
Rowe. That
wristwatch.
name did it.
A jeweler shows
It always
first a
does.
watch that only runs when
Death is a
someone touches
currency
it.
everybody
Open the
recognizes.
back,
The
there was a
counterman's eyes
pure thin
narrowed.
wire, like
That guy in
the
the
watch is
paper.
tied to a
That
person.
guy,
Then
I
she
agreed.
guilt that
He ever
tells
come in
the
here?
story.
All the
If
time,
you like
the
it,
counterman said.
comment next and
Everybody
don't
comes in
bother me.
here. The mayor could come in here, and I'd still have to wipe the counter. I'm not asking about the mayor. I'm asking about last night. He shrugged. We was busy. I nodded. Busy is a nice place for a fact to get lost, but sometimes a fact leaves a paper trail, like a receipt. His gaze shifted, cautious now. Why you want a receipt? Because receipts don't lie, I said. They just cost money. He snorted, almost amused despite himself. You got a time. Just before midnight, I said. If Hank was here, he bought coffee. That was his habit. The counterman leaned back and looked toward the kitchen pass, through as if the answer might be hanging there with the frying pans. Then he said, maybe. Maybe is a good start, I said. Who runs the register at night? He jerked a thumb toward a woman at the far end of the counter refilling sugar jars, with the grim focus of someone who has seen the end of kindness, martyr. I slid down and walked over, introduced myself, repeated the name Henry Rowe, and watched her eyes do the little flick that means recognition. Yeah, she said. He come in. What time? She didn't answer right away. That was good. A truthful memory usually has to be fetched from the brain, like a jar from a high shelf. Close to midnight, she said. Close is a rubber word, I told her. I need it hard. She frowned. Why? Because 3 people have told me hard times, I said, and I don't like the way their mouths looked while they said them. Marta stared at me, then leaned under the counter and came up with a shallow metal tray full of slips. She riffled them with fast fingers. You cops? She asked. Private. She found something and held it up between 2 fingers. Here, this him. I looked. The receipt was narrow and smudged at the edges, but the header was clear enough, the diner's name, address, and the printed time. 11:58 p.m. items. Coffee 1 paid. Cash, I felt the satisfaction hit first, then the cold behind it. Satisfaction because this was a fact with teeth. Cold because teeth usually mean someone gets bitten. You sure he paid cash? I asked. She nodded. He always pay cash. Tip good. Not friendly. Just tired. Tired. That was a word I could use. I slid a bill across the counter and took the receipt. The counterman watched me with the wary curiosity of a man who knows trouble when it orders coffee. Outside, the street was loud and indifferent. I sat in the car and stared at the little strip of paper, like it had just insulted me. 11:58. That meant Hank Rowe didn't leave alive at 11:40. The way Louis Bragan had recited it, it also meant he didn't die before midnight, which is what certain stories had been leaning toward, because midnight is a dramatic time, and people love drama when it isn't happening to them. 11:58 meant Hank was alive, outside his apartment, and buying coffee with cash 2 minutes before that call was supposed to happen. It also meant somebody's timeline was built on a lie so big it had needed an elevator to carry it. And even the elevator had refused. June's story leaned on that midnight line like a drunk on a lamppost, and now the lamppost was gone. I drove back to the brownstone with the receipt in my pocket and a growing urge to slap someone purely for neatness. Fritz opened the door, took one look at my face, and quietly stepped aside, as if I were carrying something fragile. In a way, I was. Wolfe was in the office, of course. He looked up as I came in, and for once, he didn't ask for the story first. He looked at my hand. What is it? He demanded. I crossed the room and placed the receipt on his desk, as if it were a playing card in a game where the loser dies. Wolfe picked it up between thumb and forefinger and brought it closer. His eyes tracked the print. He said nothing. That silence was Wolfe's version of a whistle. I let it hang for a moment and then supplied what he already knew. Corner diner, 2 blocks from Hank's building. He bought coffee at 11:58. Cash, that's the time stamp. Wolfe's gaze stayed on the receipt, but his mind had already moved beyond it. You could see it in the way his eyes stopped reading and started calculating. Therefore, he murmured, Mr. Bragan's 11:40 is not merely false, it is constructed. And the midnight call? I asked. Wolfe's eyes lifted to mine. It occurred after 11:58, or it did not occur as described. I leaned forward. June said she was with Hank at Pelham and Dora at midnight. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Miss Heller's story has always been too dependent on the elegance of midnight. The universe is rarely elegant, I said, so she's lying. Wolfe shook his head once, slowly. Do not simplify. She may be lying. She may be repeating. Or she may have been with Henry Rowe at midnight. Only not where she claims. I frowned. Then where? Wolfe tapped the receipt lightly with one finger, a gesture of ownership. Wherever a man goes at 11:50, ate for coffee, and returns quickly enough to be dead by 1 o'clock. That's still a lot of city, I said. Not, Wolfe said. If you find the missing minute. I stared at him. The missing minute? Wolfe set the receipt down with care and nodded once. Just once. It was his smallest acknowledgement, and in its way, his loudest. A murderer, Wolfe said, cannot remove time. He can only attempt to disguise it, but time leaves records, mechanical, printed, indifferent. This receipt is such a record. It tells us Henry Rowe was alive at 11:58. That fact forces every other statement to rearrange itself around it. I felt the hair lift slightly on my arms, because that's what happens when Wolfe's logic begins to click into place. The room gets colder, as if the truth has opened a window. You think that's the hinge? I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. It is more than a hinge. It is the minute that has been stolen, and the thief, he added softly, is the murderer. I exhaled. So what do we do with it? Wolfe leaned back, heavy and composed, and for a moment he looked almost content, the way a man looks when the chase has finally turned into a map. Now, he said, we compel the city to confess the rest of that hour. Mr. Goodwin, you will learn whether Henry Rowe walked from the diner to his building or rode. You will learn whether anyone saw him, and you will learn, most importantly, who else knew he was there. I nodded slowly. Wolfe's gaze lingered on the receipt. Because, he said, the missing minute is not merely time, it is opportunity. I picked up my notebook, already feeling my legs getting sentenced again, and headed for the door. Behind me Wolfe's voice followed, calm and inevitable. Archie, bring me the witnesses to 11:58. I didn't turn around. Sure, I said. I'll just ask the whole city to raise its hand. And somehow, with that little strip of paper in Wolfe's possession, I knew it might. Chapter 8. The lie that tripped over itself. Wolfe sent me to ask June a single question, and he sent me the way he sends me everywhere, like a letter with legs. He didn't dress it up. He didn't explain why. He just looked at me over the rim of his spectacles and said, "Go to Miss Heller, ask her one question." "One," I said. "You're feeling generous." Wolfe ignored that. "Ask what did Henry Rowe say after the whistle." I blinked. "That's it. That is it," Wolfe said. "Do not embellish it with your opinions. Do not soften it with your charm. Ask it precisely, and listen precisely." So I went. June Heller was at Pelham and Dora, on a high floor with glass walls and carpets, so thick they made your footsteps feel ashamed. The receptionist had the glazed look of a woman who could have her own murder and still keep schedule. But when I gave my name and said Nero Wolfe, she made the call. June came out 5 minutes later, folder in hand, face composed, eyes sharp enough to cut paper. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "this is becoming harassment." "It's becoming
Nero
clarity,"
Wolfe
I
and the
said,
umbilical cord
"which
of
is
his
harder to
watch.
endure."
A jeweler showed
She didn't
socially a
invite me
watch
in,
that
so I
only
didn't
ran from
ask.
someone
I
touching
walked
it.
with her to a small
On the
conference
back,
nook near the
there was
windows,
here
2
in the
chairs, a
like
table, and a
watch
view of the
tied
city
to a
that made you
person.
feel as if you were
Shall I
watching
tell it
ants
or
work.
trigger a
June
sad
sat.
story?
I
I
sat.
hope you like
I
it.
kept my notebook in
Comment
my
next,
pocket
and I will
and my voice
reply you.
neutral, because Wolfe had told me to ask precisely and listen precisely. "Miss Heller," I said, "what did Hank say after the whistle?" She answered fast. Too fast. He said, "Don't do it. That was it." No hesitation. No reaching for memory. No irritation at the question. Just a clean line, dropped like a coin. I stared at her. June's chin lifted. "What? You're sure that's what he said?" Yes. You heard him clearly. I did, she insisted, like he didn't want the caller to hear him. I nodded slowly, as if filing it away. Inside my head, something bumped into something else and made a noise. Because earlier, right there in Wolfe's office, June had claimed she couldn't hear much. She had said the caller talked too quickly. She had said Hank didn't speak much at first, only listened. She had painted a picture of a call that rushed past her like traffic. And now she was handing me a crisp, dramatic line. Don't do it. Lines like that belong in movies. They don't usually belong in real telephone calls. Unless someone wants them to. I kept my face mild. Interesting. June's eyes narrowed. What's interesting? That you remember that, I said. When you told us before you could barely hear, because the caller talked too quick. Her mouth tightened. I said I couldn't hear the caller clearly. Not the caller. I said Hank. You said Hank didn't speak. He listened. June's fingers tightened on her folder. You're correcting yourself now, I said gently. That happens. Her eyes flashed. Are you accusing me of lying? I'm collecting voices, I said. Wolf's hobby. June leaned forward. Your employer is manipulating this. Hank is dead, and you're turning it into word games. Words are where people trip, I said, especially when they run. She sat back, breathing controlled. I'm done with this. One more thing, I said, because I'm not as obedient as Wolfe thinks I am, but I'm obedient enough to keep my disobedience useful. Where were you when you heard him say it? In his office, she snapped. At Pelham and Dora, like I told you. At midnight. I nodded. All right. Thank you, Miss Heller. I stood. She stood too, clutching the folder like it contained the last scraps of her composure. Tell Wolfe, she said, voice tight, that he's not the only one who can reason. I smiled. I'll tell him. He loves competition. I left before she could add a second regret to the first. Outside, the city wind hit me and felt cleaner than the air in that glass tower. I got into the car and didn't start it right away. I sat there and replayed the exchange the way Wolfe replays voices. Not just the words, but the speed. The speed was the thing. June's answer had been immediate, as if it had been waiting near her tongue. That kind of speed doesn't come from memory. It comes from preparation. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in his office, still and massive, as if he had never been born and therefore couldn't die. Fritz was somewhere in the kitchen conducting civilization. The house smelled of roast and certainty. I went straight in and reported. Wolfe listened without interruption. When I got to June's fast answer, "Don't do it," his eyes sharpened. Then I reminded him, word for word, of her earlier claim, caller too quick, Hank mostly silent. She heard only fragments. I watched Wolfe's face change the way a room changes when someone lights a match. It wasn't dramatic. Wolfe doesn't do dramatic. It was a small brightening in the eyes, a quiet ignition. She heard a line that was never spoken, Wolfe said. I blinked, meaning. Wolfe set his fingertips together, meaning she did not remember it. She was given it, or she invented it because it belongs to the story she wishes to sell. I leaned forward. So she's in the plot. Wolfe's gaze held mine. She is in a plot. Whether it is the plot remains to be seen. I sighed. You're going to make me chase that too? Yes, Wolfe said calmly. You will now ask yourself, why would she need Henry Rowe to say, don't do it? To make it sound like Hank knew he was in danger, I said. To make the call look like a threat. To make the murder look inevitable. Wolfe corrected. Which is a subtle difference. I frowned. What difference? Wolfe's voice was low, thoughtful. If the murder was inevitable, then it is the result of Henry Rowe's choices, his dealings, his greed, his secrets that directs blame away from the murderer and toward the victim. It also encourages the police to accept a simple motive and cease inquiry. I sat back. So they want the police to stop digging. Wolfe nodded. Precisely, I said. But why distribute a story at all? Why the whistle, The midnight line, the rehearsed details. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Because the truth contains something they cannot permit to be discovered. Therefore they build a counterfeit truth and present it quickly before the real one has time to surface. He paused, and the silence in the office felt thicker, like the air had been told to hold still. Archie, Wolfe said, there is one more element that must now be addressed. I waited. When Wolfe says must, it usually means I'm about to lose the rest of my day. The receipt, he said. The coffee at 11:58, I said. Yes, Wolfe murmured. It places Henry Rowe outside his apartment at the most inconvenient moment for the counterfeit story. Therefore someone must account for those 2 minutes, between 11:58 and midnight. That is the missing minute you brought me. Now it must be filled. And you think June can't fill it, I said. June has attempted to fill it with a line that did not exist. That is not filling. That is stuffing, I grimaced. So what do you want? Wolfe leaned back, heavy and certain. I want to hear Calvin Voss. I blinked. You think Voss is the missing minute? I think, Wolfe said, that Voss is the man who knows what Henry Rowe truly bought. He looked at me, and the match in his eyes became a steady flame. Bring him, Wolfe said. And Archie, do not warn him with your charm. Surprise is essential. I stood up, already feeling the city's weight waiting outside. Sure, I said. No charm, just legs. Wolfe's voice followed me as I reached the door, and bring me his exact phrases. I didn't turn around. You'll get them, I called back, word for word, like a stenographer with bruises. As I left, the brownstone creaked softly, and for the first time it didn't sound like old wood settling. It sounded like the house enjoying itself. Chapter 9. The trap in the parlor. Wolfe set the stage in our own parlor, using people like props and truth like string. The front room of the brownstone can look like comfort if you don't know what it's for. The rugs are thick, the chairs are generous, and the lamps give off a kind of civilized glow that makes visitors forget. They're being measured. Wolfe likes that. He believes people reveal themselves faster when they think they're safe. He didn't call it a parlor, of course. Wolfe calls it the front room, the way he calls murder an annoyance. But this afternoon, he used it like a theater. He had them come again, Rafe Danner with his polished confidence, Toby Graft with his damp fear, June Heller with her tight composure, and, most important, Calvin Voss, who arrived last with the cautious impatience of a man who dislikes being summoned by anyone he can't intimidate. Voss was tall and lean, late 30s, with hair combed back and eyes that had learned to look attentive without ever being warm. He wore a good overcoat and the expression of someone who had already decided the world owed him an apology. Wolfe remained in his red leather chair in the office doorway, where he could see the entire front room without needing to enter it. That's Wolfe. He'll conduct a battle and never cross the threshold. I stood by the mantel with a sheaf of paper in my hand, and the uncomfortable feeling that I was about to play ventriloquist to a dead man. Wolfe's voice came from the office, calm and precise. Mr. Goodwin will read you a transcript. Rafe's smile flashed. A transcript of a phone call. A reconstruction, Wolfe corrected, based on what has been reported to us. June's chin lifted. Reported. Toby shifted in his chair as if the cushion had turned into guilt. Calvin Voss said nothing. He only watched the paper in my hand with an alertness that was too specific to be casual.
Nero Wolfe
I
and
cleared
Archie
my throat.
was a
This is
wristwatch.
supposed to
A
represent
jeweler
the call
shows
Hank
Wolfe
Rowe
a watch
received
that only runs
shortly
when
after
someone
midnight.
touches it.
I'll read
Open
both
the back,
sides,
there
if
was a
anything is
very
wrong.
thin wire,
Correct
black.
it.
The
Raph
watch is
chuckled
tied to a
softly,
person.
generous.
The
Wolfe's
jeweler
tone
feels
cut in,
that
mild
they
but
hear about the
firm.
story.
It is not
Wolfe had
generosity,
flipped
Mr.
on
Danner.
comment
It is
text and
necessity.
drop part
The
2.
truth requires cooperation. I began reading, keeping my voice flat, like a court clerk. Rowe. Hello. Color. 2 short whistle notes. Rowe. Who is this? Color. The door that won't open is the one you paid for, and it isn't a metaphor. Midnight is the last time you can be inside without being invited. Rowe. Say it again. Color. The door that won't open is the one you paid for, and it isn't a metaphor. Rowe. That's nonsense. Color. Bring the file downstairs. through the service hall. I didn't pause long, I didn't look up. I wanted the trap to snap on its own. But it did. Immediately, June Heller flinched at the words, service hall. A quick, sharp reaction, like a hand pulling away from heat. Then she spoke fast and certain. "No," she said. "That's wrong. He said to bring it through the service hall." Silence fell so hard you could almost hear it land. I looked up slowly. "What's wrong?" June's mouth tightened, and in that instant her intelligence fought her impulse. She realized she'd moved too fast, but it was too late to stop moving. Hank said. Her voice caught. She tried to rescue it, he said through the service hall. Toby's head jerked toward her. Raf's eyes narrowed. Voss went very still, the way a man goes still when he sees a mistake made by someone else and hopes it won't touch him. June froze mid-breath. Her eyes widened as the meaning caught up to her words. Because she had just corrected a line that no one had ever admitted hearing, and she had corrected it as if she knew. Wolfe leaned back in his chair in the doorway, and his voice drifted into the room like smoke,
Nero
soft,
Wolfe and
controlled,
umbilical cord
lethal.
of wristwatch.
Only the person
A
on the
jeweler
line,
shows for free a
Wolfe said,
watch that only
knows
runs
which
from one
direction the
particular-
lie should go.
Open the bag, there was a hair
June's
pin
face
wire,
drained of
like
color. "That's
the
not."
watch is tied to a person.
Wolfe did not
And she
raise his
refused.
voice.
Let's figure it
He
out
didn't
the
need
story.
to. "Miss
So
Heller,
if you like it,
you have repeatedly
so what's
insisted.
next? And I will
You
drop
heard
all
only
the-
fragments. You have insisted," the caller spoke quickly. "You have insisted Henry Rowe spoke little, yet you correct a detail that I introduced, an instruction, before you could possibly evaluate it. You did not merely hear, you participated." Raf rose halfway from his chair. "Now wait." Wolfe's eyes flicked to him with cold irritation. "Sit down, Mr. Danner." Raf sat, but his jaw tightened like a vice. Toby's hands were shaking. "I knew it," he blurted. "I knew she." "Be silent," Wolfe said, and Toby's mouth snapped shut. June's voice came out thin. "I didn't participate in anything. Hank was my employer. He trusted me." Wolfe's tone was almost gentle. "Trust
Nero
is not
Wolfe
relevant.
and umbilical cord
Knowledge
of
is relevant.
wristwatch. A jeweler
Explain how
shows
you
for free
knew
a
he would
watch
say
that only
upstairs."
runs when someone
June
touches it.
stared at him,
Open
lips
the bag,
parted,
there was a
eyes
hair
darting as
pin
if
wire,
searching the
like
room for an exit
the
that
watch
did
is
not
tied to a
exist.
person. Then
I
she
almost felt
refused.
sorry for
Let's
her,
figure it out the
almost.
story.
Then I
So if you
remembered
like it,
Hank Rowe was
so
dead,
next,
and someone
I
had
will drop
arranged a
all
whole
the-
little performance to make the police stop thinking. Calvin Voss spoke then quietly. "This is nonsense." Wolfe's eyes moved to him without shifting his body, like a cannon turning. "Is it?" Voss's face was composed, but his voice had a new edge. "You're twisting her words." Wolfe nodded slightly. "Then untwist them. How did she know?" Voss held Wolfe's gaze. "She guessed." Wolfe's mouth curled faintly. A precise guess made instantly under pressure, contradicting her own earlier limitations. "Remarkable, Miss Heller. Do you often make such guesses?" June's throat worked. Rafe leaned forward, smiling too hard. "Come on, Wolfe. She hears a lot of things. She works with Hank. Upstairs is a natural word." Wolfe's eyes remained on June. "It is not the word, Mr. Danner. It is the certainty." June's shoulders sagged a fraction, as if the muscles had decided to stop pretending. I said quietly, "June, where was Hank when he said it?" She blinked. "Trapped. He was." Wolfe's voice snapped. Not loud, just final. "Do not assist her, Archie." I shut my mouth. Wolfe wanted her to fall alone. June's eyes filled, not with tears, but with panic. "I was trying to help him," she whispered. Wolfe's expression did not change. "Help him to do what?" She swallowed. "To protect himself." "From whom?" Wolfe asked. Her eyes flicked to Voss. Just a flick, the way a compass needle trembles toward north. Wolfe saw it. I saw it. Voss saw it too, and his face tightened. Wolfe spoke softly, as if speaking to himself. "The file." He let that word hang, then continued, still soft. "A file is not a metaphor, Miss Heller. It is paper, it is evidence. It is leverage. Henry Rowe bought access to something, and then paid again. Paid with his life. You, it seems, were the courier. I never meant. Wolfe cut her off with a calm that felt merciless. Intentions do not resurrect the dead. Rafe's hands clenched on his knees. Toby was sweating visibly now, and he kept glancing at the front door as if it might suddenly open and let him escape his own stupidity. Wolfe shifted his gaze to Voss again. "Mr. Voss," he said, "you will now tell me what Henry Rowe truly bought." Voss's lips pressed together. "I don't know what you mean." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Yes, you do. And if you persist in that response, I will invite Inspector Kramer to join us. He will enjoy your company. I will enjoy watching him enjoy it." That did something. Voss's composure held, but the muscles around his eyes tightened, like a man bracing against a blow that hasn't landed yet. June sat rigid, staring at the paper in my hand as if it had written her sentence. Wolfe leaned back, still not leaving the office doorway, and said, almost conversationally, "We are very close now, so close that a careless correction has revealed the direction of the lie." He looked at me. "Mr. Goodwin, put that transcript away." I did, carefully, like it was a knife. Wolfe's gaze returned to June. "Miss Heller," he said, "you have already stepped onto the blade. Do not insult yourself by pretending you have not been cut." June's eyes closed for a second. When she opened them, she looked older, and the front room, with its comfortable rugs and gentle lamps, no longer looked civilized at all. It looked like a trap. Chapter 10, Wolfe never leaves. But Justice does. Wolfe laid it out clean, the way a good surgeon lays out instruments. Nothing extra, nothing missing, and everything meant to cut. It was late afternoon, and the light in the front room had gone the color of old brass. The chairs were filled again, arranged by Wolfe, with the same casual tyranny he used on menus. Inspector Kramer was there because Wolfe had finally decided the truth was ripe enough to serve. And Kramer, heavy, watchful, and already irritated, had arrived as if he'd been born in a scowl. Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins sat in the corner with a notebook, eager as a puppy that had been promised a steak. June Heller sat very straight. She had the look of a woman who had rehearsed calm and was now performing it in a room that didn't believe in applause. Rafe Danner lounged with forced ease, eyes darting more than his posture admitted. Toby Graft kept wiping his forehead with a handkerchief that was losing the battle. Calvin Voss sat quietly, hands folded, as if he believed stillness could make him invisible. Wolfe remained in his red leather chair in the office doorway, exactly where he had been when this began, a massive fixed point, while the rest of us rotated in panic. Kramer glowered at Wolfe. "All right. You dragged me here, speak." Wolfe's tone was courteous, which is what he does when he intends to be unbearable. "Certainly, Inspector. Mr. Goodwin, begin with the receipt." I stepped forward and held up the narrow diner slip like a small flag of surrender. Hank Rowe bought coffee at 11:58 p.m. 2 blocks from his building. That means he did not leave his office at 11:40, and he was alive at 11:58. Kramer's eyes went to Louis Bragan, who was present now too because Wolfe had told me to bring every voice with a stake. Bragan's face tightened, but he said nothing. Wolfe continued. Mr. Bragan's time was a recitation. It served to place Mr. Rowe elsewhere, earlier, and to support the theatrical convenience of midnight. Kramer snorted. "Theatrical." Wolfe ignored him. "Next, the elevator." I said, "The elevator repair tag shows it was out of service from 12:02 to 12:17. Yet Mr. Graft recorded Mr. Rowe leaving the building at 12:05. Unless Mr. Rowe used the stairs, which Mr. Graft never mentioned. Mr. Graft's entry is false." Toby's mouth opened. Wolfe raised one finger. Toby shut it again. Wolfe went on. "Then we have the whistle, a small flourish. 3 witnesses reported it identically, which suggests rehearsal. But when asked whether the whistle came before or after a greeting, their accounts diverged. That divergence revealed that at least one witness was copying." Kramer looked from Toby to June. "And you're saying—" Wolfe's eyes settled on June Heller. "I am saying Miss Heller arranged the performance. The whistle was her invention or her tool. She distributed it as a signature because she wanted the story remembered. June's voice was thin. That's ridiculous. Wolfe's gaze did not move. It is precise, Kramer said. You haven't said why, you haven't said how, and you haven't said who killed him. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. Mr. Goodwin, Miss Heller's phrase. I didn't enjoy it, but I did it. She said, to be clear 3 times while placing herself at Pelham and door at midnight. She insisted she heard only fragments because the caller talked too quickly. She said Hank mostly listened. Wolfe nodded slightly. And then, when Mr. Goodwin asked a single question, what did Henry Rowe say after the whistle? She answered instantly, don't do it. A line she could not have heard if her earlier limitations were true. June's hands clenched in her lap. Wolfe's voice softened, not with kindness, but with certainty. Finally, the parlor trap. Mr. Goodwin read a fabricated transcript and inserted a wrong instruction. Bring the file downstairs. Miss Heller corrected it instantly. Upstairs. Thereby proving she knew details that existed only for the caller and the recipient. It wasn't belief yet. It was attention. Wolfe leaned back, heavy and composed. Now we proceed to motive. Miss Heller was Henry Rowe's assistant. She handled petty cash, reimbursements, and small operational expenses. Items too small to audit, unless someone becomes curious. For some time she stole modest sums, regularly, quietly, small enough to be overlooked, steady as rain. June's voice rose, sharp. No. Wolfe continued, as if she were a lamp buzzing. Then Henry Rowe noticed, not because he was moral, but because he was possessive. He confronted her, not to report her, but to use her. He intended to keep her theft as leverage, perhaps to force compliance in another matter. He was a man who
Nero
bought
Wolfe
doors.
and the umbilical
June's
cord
eyes
of
were
his
wide
watch.
now,
A jeweler
fixed on
shows
Wolfe
Wolfe
as
a
if his
watch
words
that
were
only
physical
runs when
objects
someone
being
touches it.
stacked around her.
Open the bag.
Wolfe's
There was
tone
a
remained
key
calm.
working
Miss
wire
Heller
on the
realized that as long as
watch is
Henry Rowe
tied to a
lived,
person.
her
A
theft would
jeweler
never be
will
past
the
tense.
trigger
It
of
would
the
be a
story.
chain he could pull whenever he
Like
wished.
it
Therefore she
commenced
chose
next,
to remove
and I
him.
drop part 2.
Kramer's jaw tightened. And the phone call. A disguise, Wolfe said. A performance. She needed the police to believe Henry Rowe was threatened by external enemies, not destroyed by an internal accounting. She created the midnight call, complete with the whistle. She recruited Mr. Graft, who is both pliable and eager to appear useful, to support the timeline and the herd. Through the door account, she instructed him on the whistle, but he copied it imperfectly because he never truly heard it in context. He learned it secondhand, like a child memorizing a tune. Toby's face went grey. She said. It was important, she said. Be silent, Wolfe said. And Toby fell quiet again, trembling. Wolfe's eyes returned to June. You delayed the elevator to manipulate time, perhaps by arranging a service call or by tampering with a simple mechanism. You relied on the drama of midnight because it is persuasive. But timing and language are dogs that sniff out fear. The elevator tag would not bend, the diner receipt would not bend, and your own phrasing, to be clear, advertised strain. June's composure cracked. I didn't mean he was going to ruin me, he said. He said he'd tell them. He said I'd be finished. Wolfe nodded once, not in sympathy, but in confirmation. Yes. Kramer stepped forward. How did she kill him? Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. She met him after the diner. At 11:58 he was alive and nearby. She lured him back with the pretext of the basement file. Room, the door you paid for. Because Henry Rowe could not resist touching the leverage he believed was his. The murder itself required no elegance, a blunt instrument available in any building, or poison in coffee, or suffocation in a service corridor. What mattered was not the method. Inspector, what mattered was the story she needed you to believe. Kramer's face darkened, because he hates being told he has been used. And Voss. And Danner. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Mr. Voss and Mr. Danner are peripheral. Mr. Danner enjoys importance, and provided it to himself by claiming proximity. Mr. Voss knew Henry Rowe was involved in questionable dealings and expected those dealings to become the motive. He welcomed that expectation. Neither killed him. Rafe Danner's smile returned weakly, as if grateful to escape the noose. Calvin Voss stared at Wolfe with cold resentment, the resentment of a man who wanted the world to be simpler and profitable. Kramer looked at June. "You want to say anything before I take you in?" June's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She looked around the room, at Toby sweating, at Raf watching, at Voss calculating, at me standing with my notebook, like a witness to language, and then at Wolfe, who remained exactly where he had been all along. "I didn't think," she whispered, "it would come apart." Wolfe's tone was mild. "It always comes apart. That is the nature of contrivance." Kramer motioned, and Pearlie Stebbins rose eagerly, like a boy finally told. "He may run." June stood. For a moment she looked as if she might collapse, but she didn't. She walked out between the officers, neat to the end, still trying to keep herself typed and stapled. Toby slumped, relief and dread battling for ownership of his face. Rafe adjusted his cuffs. Voss stared at the carpet, as if it had betrayed him. When the door closed behind the police, the room seemed to exhale. The brownstone settled with a familiar creak, old wood, old habits, and yet another crime resolved without changing the furniture. He looked at Wolfe. "Well," I said, "you never leave, but justice does." Wolfe's eyes half closed. "Justice," he said, "is an
Nero
abstraction.
Wolfe and the
The
umbilical
police
cord
leave.
of
I
his
remain."
watch.
I
Angelo
couldn't
shows
resist.
Wolfie a watch
"You
that only
know,
runs when
for a
someone
man who
touches it.
hates drama,
Open the
you
back.
sure know
There
how
was a
to arrange an
pure thin
exit."
wire line.
Wolfe's mouth
The
tightened.
watch is tied to
"You
a
talk too
purse.
much,
When
Archie.
Angelo kills
Somebody
it,
has
let's
to,"
figure out
I
the
said.
story.
"Otherwise this
I
house
hope
would
the
just sit
lights
here
blink.
and grow orchids
Coming
until the
next,
city
the middle
collapses."
drop part 2.
Wolfe's eyes opened a fraction, and there was the faintest hint of satisfaction, less a smile than an acknowledgement that the world continued to revolve around his chair because it had no choice. "Beer," Wolfe said. That was my dismissal and my reward. I headed for the kitchen, where Fritz would pretend not to have heard everything, and where the smell of dinner would politely insist that life continued. Behind me, Wolfe stayed right where he'd been, the fixed point of West 35th Street, while outside the city moved, reluctantly, noisily, and at last, correctly.